Do you know? I can't think. I can't think of any major thing that we sort of had to overcome to do it. I suppose telling your record label that for your second album, you don't want a producer, and not only do you not want a producer, you also want them to give you money to buy a studio. That's probably the biggest thing. But then that was quite easy. They seemed to go for that quite quickly.
How did you pull that off? I mean, what kind of assurances did you give them, or what was the?
Well, you don't. It's a Glasgow thing. You got that sort of nonchalance. Where you just say, when you ask a question, you almost convince the person to give a positive answer as you're asking it. I don't know how it works, but it didn't seem too hard. Maybe it was. Maybe behind the scenes our manager had to do a lot of bargaining, but
right.
But that was probably the only thing that I suppose was, because the rest of it was all was like clockwork. It wasn't a struggle in any way.
Yeah.
As it shouldn't be.
Now, did they check on you, and what kind of access did they?
See,
obviously it's a big chance that they.
Well, we cleverly bought a studio in Glasgow, which is the opposite end of the country from London. So nobody ventured up that often. Do you know? Actually, nobody came up even once. So we were kind of let alone just to do it, And you got to give there's a guy called Nick Gatfield who was the head of Ireland back in the UK. He's not there anymore, but you got to give him a lot of credit, because a lot of heads of labels would have laughed you out of their office, and he went for it. He's good. Labels get a hard time, and I'll give them a hard time when they need to, but they've also got to be given some praise for that.
Yeah. It's the ultimate.
It was quite brave, yeah. And we've now got a studio, which is quite cool.
Which I guess is an investment in your future.
Well, it is.
The next one too.
Well, the thing is, we're really sort of passionate about making a lot of music. There seems to be there is a thing right now for bands where you make a record every 2 or 3 years, because you don't have time to make any more than that, because you spend 18 months promoting it. I would actually just rather make 2 albums a year. I don't see why we can't get back to that. That's what they used to do in the 60s. Why can't? Yeah, why?
John came out with an album every 3 months, it seemed.
The first 2 Zepp albums were in the first year of the band being a band. I don't see why it can't be like that. We would much prefer doing it that way. So now that we've got that studio there, it means we can kind of push that a little bit more and say, well, do you know what? Certainly after this album, we plan on making a lot of music.
First album. What do you think it was? The essence of that first album that really captured everybody's imagination?
No idea. I'm just glad that it did.
What struck you about it? Because I'm sure this wasn't your first foray into.
Oh, do you know what? That record. The record sort of didn't really suit the band, though. It was a funny one. It sold a lot of copies and it done well. And it took us from being completely nowhere to overnight being further down the line than we ever thought we would get. But at some point you kind of go, well, does it suit this band though? The music on that record, and some of it just sort of didn't. There was a lot of songs on that record that we just didn't even play live. We just weren't really the kind of things that we would listen to or want to play. And the thing about the new record was that it was exactly what we wanted to play. It was exactly what we wanted to put on a record. It was exactly what we wanted to release. And it can be misconstrued, when I talk about the first album. I still like it, and I still like songs on it. I wrote them. I have to like them, but also because I wrote them, I still have reserved the right to dislike some of them. And there was a little bit of that with that record, which is why this record had to be done the way that it was.
Yeah. And with that being said, what does the set list look like at this point?
It's absolutely better than it's ever been, because now we can play all the songs that people want to hear from sort of both albums, and because we're playing the songs from the second album and they suit us a bit more. The songs in the first album that you play kind of start to go along that direction as well. They've gotten heavier and you know, and we're starting to have a bit more fun with those songs again. You know, because by the end of last year, we were sick of playing them. You know, because it's all we had to play. Now that you got 2 albums to play, you know, it was why we were so desperate to do it so quickly, because we were desperate to have 2 albums worth of material to play rather than that one album that we were spanking the life out of. You know.
Yeah, yeah. No doubt, no doubt. And, you know, obviously, you know, does that tie into, you know, Here We Stand, the whole...
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? You would think that we had been clever, but I don't think we had. You know, for a while I wanted to call the record "The Year of the Thief," or "Good Old Fashioned Thievery" was the other one. You know, I thought that would have been good, or a rough guide to pub rock, just to annoy certain people. But you know, we'd written titles down on a scrap piece of paper, and that one just stood out, you know. But I suppose, given the way that we made the record, given the sort of chance that we took on it, I suppose it's quite apt, you know. But it wasn't really thought about that way. We're not clever enough, you know.
What inspired Mistress Mabel?
Mistress Mabel. Want me to talk about it? Do you know what? It's a great song with terrible lyrics, you know. Really terrible lyrics. But at the same time, they're just lyrics that don't suit this time, you know. I always loved that, like all those old sort of Kinks and Beatles songs, like Lovely Rita and, you know, Lola and, you know, I mean, who writes a song about a traffic warden, you know? Mabel was kind of along those lines, you know. I'm a sucker for all that stuff. Yeah. What I sometimes forget is that we live 40 years after that time, you know, and that the name Mabel just isn't the coolest name to call a song after, you know. It was a great song with some dodgy lyrics, you know, but they were written at the very last minute when it was like, oh God, you know, I was trying to come up with something else with that song, something lyrically, I just couldn't get there, you know, couldn't quite grab it. And we only had so much time left to finally finish recording. And it was like, oh, well, okay, I know how to write this kind of song, you know. So we did, you know. I like the song. It's actually great to play live. It's one of the most fun to play live right now. It wasn't really meant to be a single or anything, you know. I never thought of it as a single. It wasn't one of my favourites on the record, but it was one of my favourites to play live, you know.